Hello everyone, this is part 12 of What If Naruto Formed a New Team, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. You look a bit nervous, Haku-kun. Are you gonna be okay? The dark-haired boy turned to Naruto. He leaned against the wall of the gymnasium beside Gaara. Haku rubbed his chin in reflex, trying to relieve his obvious anxiety. Haku sighed in response, "I'm fine, really." Naruto nodded, believing him full-heartedly. He pulled a kunai from his holster and began to sharpen it on a wetting stone. Gaara's glacier eyes opened a margin as he spoke. "Have you restocked on weapons like Jiraiya-sensei said?" The blonde boy frowned at him. "Do you see me holding this kunai? I wasn't talking to you." "Oh." A withered smile appeared on Haku's face. "I have. Relax. Like it could be so easy." The redhead settled his eyes shut again and attempted to calm himself, but his mind was buzzing like a hive of bees at the moment. At any time the next part of the Chunin exam would commence, and Jiraiya had only left them with a goofy grin behind his pipe earlier that morning. He had not provided them with much information on what was to come. "We've been waiting in this tower for a while now, what's gonna happen next?" Naruto stowed his kunai away after it was sharpened to his satisfaction. "Things can only get rougher from here out, I bet." The other teams that had managed to arrive in One Piece were also hovering in silent apprehension about the place. It was when a group of recognizable Junin appeared on the opposite side of the room did the genin snap out of their stupor and congregate in that general direction. Haku and Naruto stood, stretched, and then followed after Gaara. They had been grateful for the day of rest they had once they had reached the tower. Jiraiya had even smuggled food and weapons in for them, then asking if they had spotted any cute Kanoiki during their escapade in the Forest of Death. Now they were ill at ease, knowing what horrific power some of the other ninja attending the exam possessed. The Hokage stood in front of a huge statue of the Ram seal on the opposite end of the gymnasium. He and the present Junin observed the curious number of trainees who had passed. The genin teams lined up in adjacent formations, chattering amongst themselves with a newfound energy. Haku suspected that the sight of the Hokage himself may have reinstalled some vigor into the other ninja. "This is it. This is it. This is it." Naruto's excitement could only be contained in a small whisper to Haku, who stood with trembling shoulders in front of him. "We are gonna kick so much I just know it." Gaara stared at the back of Naruto's head, trying to keep his emotions in check. It was surprisingly difficult. Not far off was the team of the Sand Village. Miyosuke, stubborn as ever, kept his cold eyes glued to his sensei up front while he mulled over their mission objectives. His anger at his teammates was not well hidden, for there was just no talking to them, not since they had realized that all the years of their father assuring them that their baby brother was were totally inaccurate. Miyosuke had insistently reminded them that it didn't matter, and that Gaara had been a vessel of a terrible demon, and that there was absolutely no point in stressing over it. Their brother was The ninja they had met in the forest was just another worthless leaf genin. Still, both Temari and Kankuro remained watchful over the red-haired boy, unable to think of how he could have possibly survived so many years in another village without their father knowing. Closer to Team 2 stood an exhausted-looking Team 10. Shikamaru, sporting dark circles beneath his eyes, accepted a potato chip Shuji had offered him. Ino, slightly more dapper, gazed in fangirlish awe at Sasuke, whose team they had assisted in the Forest of Death. Although, they hadn't provided so much assistance as they had a distraction. Team 7 stood quietly, completely worn, with only Sakura muttering in concern to Sasuke, who disregarded her troubles. Outwardly, Team 13 appeared as healthy as ever, Lee already congratulating Tenten on her historic, single-handed defeat of an ambush by Kabuto's team. She tried to quiet him, but to no avail. Hinata's soft eyes were weary as they settled on Naruto, her beloved, grateful he and his teammates were well. She was utterly spent in spirit after enduring all of her teammates' animosity. Shino and Sato refused to speak unless it was to her, and even then she could feel their discontent towards each other. Haku glanced back at her by chance and surprised her. He offered her an amiable smile, which she returned as best she could. Noting her fatigue, his eyes scanned briefly over the remainder of her team, in which he noticed a pair of kodaki adorning Sato's belt. His gray eyes widened and he nudged Naruto gently in the ribs in order for him to redirect his attention to the unexpected sight. Gaara, ever observant, stole a glance as well. Naruto swallowed his gasp and then turned to Haku, hissing in confusion, what does he think he's doing with a pair of swords? Is he crazy? The too small to be swords, Naruto-kun, Haku answered in a low voice, trying to explain, too small to even be short swords really. They are called kodaki, but how he obtained them is a mystery to me. Gaara snorted, it's unlikely he's even able to fully wield them. Naruto shrugged, the shock wearing off, you never know. He's a weird kid. They returned their attention to the front where a ninja had appeared, stifling a fit of coughs. Once he had regained his breath he turned his eyes to the genin, MN. Welcome. I am Gecko Hayat and I am your examiner for the next portion of the Chunin exam. He was interrupted by a sudden cough, after which he continued, there will now be a word from Hokage-sama before the third portion begins. Hayat stepped to the side, allowing Hiruzen to speak. The Sandaim's eyes were uncommonly rough once they settled on his audience. I congratulate all of you for making it this far, for it is proof that you possess the minds and skills of true shinobi. Naruto folded his arms in a manner similar to his equally impatient red-haired friend, buckling down for another boring speech from the leader of his village. By participating in the next part of the Chunin selection exam, you will be battling your peers to the death, representing the friendship that unites our villages together. There was a soundless pause in which the genin took a moment to consider his words, shortly after they concluded that they had no understanding whatsoever what he was talking about. Sakura, tired yet willful, spoke up with a few others, friendship. How can our fighting each other represent goodwill towards other villages? Kakashi gave her a measured look from afar and she fell quiet again, knowing better than to get too worked up. Decades ago, when the great ninja villages were still young, endless wars persisted for years on end. As shinobi, it is one's will to do battle and to defend their respective homes. In times such as these, long after those battles, the Chunin exam stands as a reminder of the true nature of a ninja even in times of peace. Sarutobi watched as comprehension crept up onto the faces of a few of the listening nin. You are all part of an invaluable tradition that upholds the bond between the shinobi villages. As such, it is your duty to preserve the bond and honor the ninja before you who gave their lives for your homes. The subject seemed to clear up after that. Haku took the words to heart, approving of the goal of the exam, as brutal as it sounded. He was disappointed to see that his teammates didn't share his enthusiasm. Naruto watched his mentor from across the room, surprised that he didn't have any of his notes out. Instead, the Toad Sage stood silently beside Kakashi with his eyes trained on the wall farthest from Orochimaru. Had he chosen to neglect all self-control, the entire exam could have gone to hell in a handbasket right there. Jiraiya could barely stomach the snake traitor's return, let alone his attack on his pupils. When this is over, Orochimaru, I swear, there will be hell to pay. He inhaled deeply as he tried to remain cool. Once Hokage-sama allows me, I will take your freshly severed head to him myself. The people you've killed and the harm you've done, you'll regret the day you went near my students. The snake Sennin had chosen a new disguise as a Junin sensei garbed in dark clothing. He kept a watchful eye over the two genin he had branded. He had no trouble at all being so near to his old teammate, contrary to how Jiraiya was feeling. The Sandaime finished, allowing Hayat to continue. The upcoming matches will be one-on-one and randomized. Any ninja who feel that they will not be able to compete should withdraw now. Hayat glanced over to some of the more battered-looking shinobi. Without hesitation, Kabuto and his teammates raised their hands, by an earlier order from Orochimaru. The other Leaf genin could understand their plight, for many of their wounds, inflicted by a certain weapons specialist, had gone untreated and could possibly prove fatal. We're out, Kabuto groaned, adjusting his glasses, we won't be able to continue. Hayat nodded to them and the other genin watched as they departed, looking very relieved. Although it looked tempting, the remaining ninja knew they had come too far to quit. No other shinobi asked to be dismissed. No one else then. The proctor made one last call and the enduring squad stayed quiet. Hayat nodded, very well. As of now, the third stage has begun. The board will display 2 random names of those remaining to fight. He gestured to a huge scoreboard high on the left side of the far wall. Everyone present looked up expectantly as names flashed rapidly on the black screen and finally settled on two of them. Hayat restrained a loud cough. Ahem. The first match will be between. He consulted the board's readout, Aberame Shino and Rock Lee. All other ninja must proceed up to the balcony now. Sato and Hinata, stunned, did not at first move. Shino appeared totally relaxed, but they, on the other hand, could not help but fear for him as he was the first to fight. The silver-haired boy frowned inwardly and then padded up to the balcony to rejoin his sensei. Hinata suppressed her anxiety, frightened by how quickly it had started. Good luck, Shino-kun. Thank you. His calm attitude upset her as she departed. Neither Neji or Tenten could have gotten a word in edgewise to lead you to Guy's last-minute pep talk. Now listen, Lee, do nothing but your best. The fires of youth burn brightly within you. I will, Guy-sensei. Good luck, my student. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy promptly punched him in the face to get him moving, tears of joy rolling down his cheeks. Lee recovered immediately, saluting his teacher and teammates, who could only sigh at the sight of him as they ventured up to the higher level. It was a scene that had bewildered all who had not been witness to it before. So, naturally, Team 2 weathered it quite well, as did Teams 7 and 8. It wasn't nearly as bad as it was the Tanabata festival. Haku recalled with a shudder. Without further interruption, the two-leaf genin faced off, neither intimidated in the least, as Hayat ended yet another coughing fit. Ready, you may begin. Hayat backed away, letting the battle commence. Shino, calm and smooth, drew a kunai. His eyes scanned Lee from behind his dark glasses, who had taken a ready pose. He predicted that Lee was going to come into close quarters to fight. This would complicate things because Shino knew he fought best at a distance. He had to maintain the space between them. It will be an honor to fight against another talented shinobi from my village. Lee proclaimed, leaping forward with surprising speed. The Aberame boy threw the kunai with precise timing, but thanks to his training with Tenten, Lee dodged it effortlessly and continued on. Lee turned, preparing for a roundhouse kick, and was dismayed when it was easily countered. The watching shinobi was silent as Lee cast a flurry of expert punches which Shino blocked with great effort. Kurenai admitted to herself while observing that Shino was, in her opinion, her most gifted student. He was able to adapt to most opponents. He kept up well with Lee, but Kurenai knew that soon he would use his cunning to disable his opponent's taijutsu. Lee, while weaving away from what could have been a brutal hit, saw an opening in Shino's defense and went for it. With a cry, Lee planted a terrible U squarely on Shino's lower jaw. Hinata squeaked in spite of herself. Shino, a moment later, dispersed into a swarm of Kikaichu insects, much to Lee's shock. The bugs of Shino's doppelganger took hold of the enemy, slowing his movements as he struggled to get them off. Shino appeared behind Lee, his insects scuttling away from their host in increasing numbers as they joined together to attack Lee. My insects will drain you of your chakra, the Aberame boy warned, as Lee swiped him off frantically, still trying to get nearer to his opponent. You may avoid injury if you give in now. Naruto leaned excitedly on the railing between his teammates, impressed. Oh man. Bushy brows is in trouble. He better do something soon. Haku nodded in agreement, still nervous over his future fight. Gaara, unlike his friends, knew that Lee was much more capable than most gave him credit for. Hinata shifted her eyes to Sato. Much to her surprise, he was wearing an anxious expression. His midnight blue eyes were focused on the match below and held no trace of anger as they had before. Maybe Sato-kun is worried now. Hinata pondered, noticing his change in behavior. This match was a shock to him. Is it possible that he wanted to fight Shino-kun himself? It seemed likely. Sato had trouble letting go of his anger, even if it was sparked through his teammates looking out for his safety. Now Shino was in a fight that Sato had never imagined could have taken place, and he was unsure of how he was supposed to feel at all. Kurenai turned her crimson eyes to Guy, who had his signature grin plastered to his face as he observed the match. She knew by now that there were definite parallels in skill between the student and teacher, if that were any more indication of her fears. Lee ended his struggle against the insects clambering onto him by the hundreds, and instead looked up to his mentor questioningly, waiting for a signal. Tenten frowned, hoping he wasn't planning anything too drastic. Once Guy had given him a thumbs up and a huge, dazzling smile, Lee's expression changed. Shino wondered why it was taking Lee so long to surrender, but he decided to stay cautious, sensing a change in strategy fast approaching. Many people watching had blinked and missed it, as the Kikaichu insects attempting to drain Lee's chakra were blown off of him all at once, and the boy in green vanished. Kakashi, observant as ever, gave a look of disapproval to Guy, wondering when he had taught the boy to open chakra gates. The sudden surge of energy had stunned the bugs, leaving them belly up on the floor and unable to move. Shino had no time to react once Lee had reappeared, moving extraordinarily fast, and hit him with a vicious, high-speed flying kick. Sato flinched. The Aberrane boy flew across the room, to the horror of many in the audience, and crashed into the opposite wall with a small yet noticeable shockwave. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but he was still able to function. Shino took a moment to regroup. How was he unaffected by my insects? That was no normal amount of chakra. Shino righted himself, ready to fight again, but unable to understand what had just happened. How can bushy brows move that fast? Naruto muttered in astonishment. It is a result of his training with Guy-sensei, I believe, Haku answered, also in awe. He is much stronger than I had originally thought. Lee stood patiently, wearing a confident expression as he anticipated Shino's thoughts. You see now that your insects were not able to drain my chakra and will not be able to in the future. Slowly, the Kikaichu insects on the floor began to regain mobility and returned to Shino, hissing to him the dislike of his opponent. In his own mind he agreed with them. Lee was a bit too energetic for his taste. Shino threw a round of shuriken as he rushed at Lee, who was also approaching, and prepared to create another clone from his insect allies. Again with an invisible speed, Lee disappeared before the projectiles could reach their mark. Frustrated, Shino skidded to a halt and formed seals, a costly mistake. Lee reappeared again, low to the floor, and kicked Shino into the air before he could complete his jutsu. Lee's teammates watched expectantly, having seen it before as Shino struggled, only to get hit repeatedly, preventing him from returning to the ground. His insects could not move fast enough to catch up to them. Sato was horrified, having never seen Shino take so many ruthless hits. It was at that moment he had given up his resentment. He could accept that his teammates only promised to prevent him from using the Chidori in order to protect him. It had been a poor excuse to squander their friendship. Shino, come on, you've got to fight back. The young Hatake threw his fists in the air, hollering, it isn't over yet. Kurenai didn't fight the small smile that bloomed on her lips. Hinata, though surprised, was grateful that Sato had finally broken out of his funk, even if it had taken a long while. Nearby, Team 2 was also startled, for it had been the first time in over 5 days they had heard a peep out of Sato. Shino was shocked to hear his teammate cheer for him and counted a number of Lee's strikes in response, buying enough time for his insects to reach him and begin their assault on Lee. Lee, though inspired by the cheering, was ready to end the battle, shadow of the dancing leaf. Lee's arm bindings came loose and coiled around Shino, restricting his movement, and Sato watched, stupefied, as Lee began pulling Shino down with him towards the ground, head first. Front Lotus. The rapidly spinning combatants crashed down, leaving a cloud of dust in the aftermath of the attack. An uproar followed, many shinobi were unsure of the end result. Naruto was left speechless, finding it difficult to say anything after witnessing the sheer force of the attack. Jiraiya only smirked, finding it interesting that once a young was incredibly skilled in taijutsu. When visibility down below returned, Lee was the first to be seen, standing on shaky legs. He looked pleased with his work, despite a few Kikaichu insects still trying to feast on his chakra. A short ways off, Shino could be seen in a small crater, weakly struggling to stand and failing at it. Lee's front lotus could have maimed him had his insects not broken the worst of his fall. It was quiet for a long moment as Shino used up the last of his strength before collapsing, spent. Hayate approached, fighting back a few threatening coughs. The winner of the match is Rock Lee. Sato, unable to stop himself, leapt over the railing and went to his fallen teammate, hoping his injuries weren't too extensive. Hinata stayed close to Kurenai as tears welled in her pale, white eyes. She was glad that her teammates had gotten over their hostilities. Shino was conscious yet mortified over his loss. He looked up at Sato who helped him stand, not minding the insects that climbed onto him. It didn't take long before a goofy grin found its way onto Sato's face, as it often did. You did great, buddy. That's got to be one of the best fights I've seen in a while. He paused guiltily. I'm sorry I was a jerk. Shino said nothing, but offered a nod. Kurenai folded her arms, approving, and spoke quietly to Hinata. When will they ever learn? The Hyuga girl smiled slightly, even if Shino's loss was disappointing. Lee, predictably, was a gracious winner. That was a splendid match. Your youth is commendable beyond a doubt, Shino-kun. Sato snorted in laughter as he and the annoyed Aburame returned up to the balcony, friends once again. The Junin could tell that the first match had inspired the watching genin. Guy had decided it was an ideal moment to speak with his eternal rival who was nearby. So Kakashi, what do you make of my hardworking student? There was a long, awkward silence. A few moments later, Kakashi looked up from his naughty book and turned to an expectant-looking Guy. Did you say something, Guy? Guy clenched his teeth in aggravation. That Kakashi thinks he's so cool. I'll show him one of these days. Lee, great job. Tenten finally mustered the strength to smile when Lee had returned. Of course I knew you had it in the bag from the get-go, but still, you looked good out there. Thank you, my beautiful teammate. She sighed, expecting such a flowery response. Tenten turned her gaze to Neji, who gave her a sour look. He did not feel like congratulating Lee at the moment. Her eyes narrowed in impatience as she waited. When finally, he spoke, but not approvingly. You were slower than usual. Tenten sighed, wishing he could try to be a tad friendlier. Lee grinned in response, finding it more favorable than what Neji often criticized him for. A few paces away stood Guy, challenging Kakashi to a round of rock paper scissors. Jiraiya scratched his chin, finding the outcome of the match interesting. In turn, it made him curious as to how his own students would fare in their own approaching matches. Hey Squirts, there's something you should probably be aware of. Naruto gave him an alarmed look. And you're telling us now? Yep, he nodded. Try to understand the fact that this is the first preliminary of the third stage of the Chunin exam has had in over several years. His students gave him questioning looks, meaning that it is extremely unusual so many genin made it this far. Not more than 10 on average pass, but here now there are over 20 ninja competing. It is quite strange there are so many strong shinobi all competing at the same time. Haku agreed, seeing the break in the normal pattern in the exam. How can there suddenly be so many more passing genin, sensei? His teammates also found it curious. I have a few theories. Jiraiya answered slowly, lighting his pipe as his eyes narrowed at Orochimaru. For now, the only thing you three can do is tough it out. If any weird crap starts going down, we'll know. The new readout appeared on the board. The second match will be between Tsuchi-kin and Nara Shikamaru. Hayate announced, glancing up towards the balcony. Oh man, why does my match have to be next? And against a girl too? Shikamaru muttered irritably, and his Junin instructor gave him an expectant look. Good luck out there. Chuji smiled, assuming that Shikamaru may decide to give in quickly, but still hoped to motivate him. Alright Shikamaru, get down there and knock her block off. Ino was enthusiastic. Shikamaru complied, taking his time as he left the balcony, his hands jammed in his pockets. It wouldn't have been so much of an issue, he figured, if his team hadn't faced down the sound Nin Kanoiki earlier in the Forest of Death. Sakura's team gets ambushed and Ino has a mental breakdown while we watch her take on 3 enemy ninja. Sounds like any other mission we're on actually. He sighed inwardly when he reached the main floor. I really don't want to fight this chick. Shikamaru stood at the room's center, staring down his opponent, and what's worse is that she's seen my jutsu and I haven't seen hers. It would be a problem, undoubtedly, facing a foe who had already seen his strategy in action. Especially topping off the fact that he had very little incentive to fight anyway. The lazy bum's up now. I've never seen him fight before. Naruto folded his arms behind his head, immensely bored. Truthfully, Naruto didn't expect Shikamaru would make it so far, considering that he was such a slothful ninja. But the exam, he had found, held many surprises. Haku stood beside him, still tense, while Gaara leaned against the wall behind them in silence. Kin smirked maniacally at Shikamaru, feeling confident. She had not forgotten his team's interference with their plan to KO Uchiha Sasuke and she was ready to put him in his place. Begin. Hayate stepped back, waiting for the next combatants to start. I'm going to finish you quickly and painfully, Kin announced, jumping back and putting distance between herself and Shikamaru. The Leaf Nin hadn't expected her sudden O of Senbon, but he managed to dodge seconds before they were able to hit him. Senbon, Shikamaru wasn't happy and dodged another round of needles. His attention was diverted when a small, ringing sound came from behind him, startling him. His dark eyes scanned over two Senbon that had missed him and had been embedded into the wall. Attached to them were bells, tinkling an eerie sort of sound. Shikamaru then noticed the sound Kunoiki controlling the bells herself from across the way with string, while also throwing more Senbon at him. I've played into her trap. He dodged in response but was still struck by 3 of the needles, thankfully in no critical areas. Kin smirked again, seeing how easily manipulated he had proven to be. Ask not for who the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Shikamaru muttered in annoyance as he extracted the painful needles from his arm and shoulder, trying to come up with a plan. Kin rang her bells again and this time, Shikamaru found, they had a strange effect on him. Kin appeared to multiply from where she stood. A blurry line of 6 Kunoiki appeared as his eyes grew fuzzy with the ringing bells, disorienting him. Yup, this is definitely genjutsu. I guess I'm going to have to stake out the real one. What a drag. I only threw 3 needles the last time, but the next time I'll throw 5. She warned, bringing mathematics into her favor. You'll be a big pincushion once I'm through with you. Before she could launch more Senbon, she frowned, puzzled. Her confusion turned into alarm when she saw Shikamaru stand, smirking triumphantly. Looks like my shadow possession technique was a success. Kin's eyes widened in alarm, finding that she was completely frozen and under her opponent's power. She was certain she had remained watchful of his shadows. She couldn't believe she had overlooked something. Bored again, Shikamaru decided to point out her error. You should have realized that the thread you had attached to those bells wouldn't have cast a shadow at such a height. She glanced in horror to the thin shadow cast on the floor. All I had to do was stretch out my shadow and bingo. I've got you now. Asuma, above with his other 2 students, gave a grunt of approval from behind his cigarette. Ino was ecstatic. Awesome Shikamaru. Now finish her off. Reaching into his holster, Shikamaru drew out a kunai, prepared to end the fight. Kin watched as she too drew out a kunai, mirroring his actions. There's no way he's crazy enough to. Without a second thought, Shikamaru threw his kunai, with Kin echoing him helplessly. He leaned back to avoid the knife she had thrown at him. Relieved, she did the same, dodging the kunai, and hitting her head with a powerful thud on the wall behind her. Kin fell to the floor unconscious and was then released from Shikamaru's control. He stood up again, adding, it would have also helped if she had been paying attention to her surroundings. Hayate found the victor obvious. The winner is Nara Shikamaru. Chuji munched furiously on a bag of chips, unable to believe that Shikamaru of all people had won his match. Ino stood beside him raving, pleased with the outcome. Who knew that lazy guy could actually pull it off? Naruto muttered, completely baffled. Haku nodded in agreement, also not expecting it. His strategy was impressive. Maybe he has more skill than he lets on. Fair. Yeah, right. The blonde snorted in reply, doubtful. Shikamaru returned up to the balcony, not very proud of his victory. Without further preamble, the scoreboard selected the next pair of combatants, whose names Hayate read aloud as he resisted a loud cough. The next match will be between Yamanaka Ino and Temari. Shikamaru, who had just reunited with his team, gave her a troubled look as she patted his shoulder. She grinned and then proceeded down to her own match. Ino was to say, quite confident after seeing her lazy teammate come out victorious in his battle and had few worries. The Nara glanced over at the Kunoiki of the Sand Village who also went down to the main level, having a dark, merciless look in her eyes. He didn't like that look. Gaara stared unblinking as his sister descended, unsure of what to think. Gaara-kun has been acting strangely ever since we reached the tower, haven't you noticed? Haku asked in a nearly inaudible voice to Naruto. The blonde nodded, yeah. I can't say I know why. Haku and Naruto found Gaara's lack of communication more irksome than usual. It was still a mystery to them what had been bothering their red-haired friend for so long. Gaara, when asked about it, denied there ever being a problem. Temari, at first sight of Ino, concluded that she wouldn't be much of a threat. I'll finish her fast, there's no point in dragging the fight out. She looked up at Gaara and jumped when their eyes met. Just don't take this personal, baby brother. I didn't ask to fight another leaf ninja. Hayate began the fight, but Temari hadn't been paying much attention. If you're not going to start, then I will, Ino declared, beginning by hurling a hail of kunai and shuriken. Not much bothered, Temari reluctantly took her eyes away from Gaara and replaced them on Ino. Her fan, almost reflexively, deflected the projectiles with ease. Ino, greatly dismayed, came closer while throwing more weapons, only for them to be blocked time and again. As seconds evolved into minutes, Ino's apprehension grew. I can't get close with her using that big fan of hers. She frowned to herself. I'm just going to have to try something else then. Ino, reasserting her confidence, formed hand seals. Here's something you can't block with a fan. Sakura observed the fight from above and held her breath, hoping Ino could pull it off. She better win this match so I can face her in the next round. Temari narrowed her eyes at Ino, not understanding her aim. What's she babbling on about? There are few jutsu she can use that will harm me. Ino was glad to see that Temari had no knowledge of how to avoid her attack and didn't bother to try to dodge it. Mind-body switch technique. Temari had only thought to move too late, but she froze an instant later. Ino's team watched anxiously as she fell to the floor limp, leaving them to hope that she hadn't missed her target. Did it work? Chuji asked lowly. He and his teammates were unable to tell. Kakashi glanced down at his pink-haired pupil, seeing how she was more attuned to the current battle than she had been to the first. He smiled beneath his mask, knowing a healthy rivalry would do her good. Temari's eyes opened and she smiled. Gotcha. What's going on? Kankuro muttered, noting the change in his sister's behavior. Something definitely just happened here. I think that goofy leaf girl got her. Miyosuke mumbled, finding it difficult to believe. It's not like she saw it coming, the fool. Kankuro flashed his teeth angrily at his pessimistic teammate, not wanting to hear any of his derogatory comments. Ino, once inside Temari's mind, set straight to work. All right. I'll just end this match and head back to my body. This was a total cakewalk. To her surprise, she detected a very ominous presence that she had not anticipated to find. This mind, unlike others she had seen, was deep, dim, and pained, swirling with thoughts and dark memories as she tried to establish an influence in the foggy realm. Wow, it's pretty creepy in here. What do you think you're doing? Temari's voice came clear as a bell from behind her, and Ino lost focus once she spun around, horrified. You. But how? I thought I suppressed you completely. You shouldn't be able to. Scowling, Temari glared at the invading leaf Kanoiki. It isn't very polite to intrude in other people's minds and you. She paused, livid. You dare enter my mind. It's private and it's strong. It isn't something that a half-baked ninja like you could overpower. Ino was upset to find that she hadn't so much as raised Temari's arm in the air before things went downhill. You're leaving now, and once you're back where you belong, I'm going to crush you, the Sand Ninja announced, Ino backing away in terror. Out. The astral form of Temari backhanded Ino in the face, sending her crashing out of her body and back from whence she came. With a jolt, Ino's once limp body gained a consciousness, and she wobbled awkwardly to her feet, her brain reeling. Sakura frowned, knowing something went wrong. What happened? I thought for sure Ino Pig had her. No way. Shikamaru and Chuji were as equally stunned as Ino, never before seeing a mind that she could not gain control over. Asuma sighed, fearing what would happen next. Once Temari was back in control of herself, she opened her fan fully, glaring at Ino. See whirlwind. The attack was vicious and intended to be so. Temari would not stand for her mind to be violated. Ino fell, unable to fight. Temari is the winner. Hayate found her technique impressive, and even more so, the power of her own mind, which could fend off intruders. With a disheartened sigh, Shikamaru went below to retrieve her. Though she weakly protested his help and refused to raise her eyes out of shame, he gave her a soft word, commending her for her effort. Chuji was relieved that it hadn't gone worse, and offered her a snack when she had returned to her team, scratched and bruised. She accepted it, unwilling to look at them. Sakura felt something constrict in her stomach, pity and a mix of disappointment. She had hoped to be the one to defeat Ino, but at the same time hadn't expected her to be beaten so badly. Hayate called out the new names the board displayed. The fourth match will be between Kanosuke Nari and Kankuro. Gaara's light eyes followed after his older brother nostalgically. Kankuro frowned, hoped to have had more time to congratulate his sister, but proceeded down anyway, hoping Miyosuke wouldn't act like AA around her. He found it curious that he would be facing a cloud shinobi even when Kumogakur had been allied with Sand and Sound for the upcoming invasion planned for the end of the exam. Ally or not, he refused to hold back. You may begin when ready. Hayate stepped back again, allowing the fight to commence. With no hesitation, Nari took the chain scythe that had been waiting at his side and flung it with a cry at his opponent. Kankuro could not dodge easily with his Bursum puppet still on his back and only managed to avoid the sickle. Nari pulled back, looping the chain around Kankuro's arm and attempted to drag him nearer. A moment later he formed hand seals while still gripping the chain, sending an electric current through the metal towards Kankuro. He had seen it before and anticipated this new Cloud Nin to have a similar strategy to the ninja they had encountered in the Forest of Death. The shock, much to the Kumo Nin's astonishment, had not affected Kankuro at all. The henge fell and what the young Cloud Shinobi thought he had been attacking was in actuality the puppet that had been carried on Kankuro's back. Logic then proved that the person emerging from the bandages beside Karasu must have been the real Kankuro. He smirked, his face paint making his face look more aggressive than he truly was, surprised. With a sudden tug, Kankuro directed Karasu to pull back on the chain tangled around its forearm, yanking Nari forward, his boots scraping against the floor. Unable to free his scythe in time, the blue-haired ninja was enveloped inside the battle puppet, finding blades waiting inside that would shred him at Kankuro's whim. The boy cried for help, acknowledging his defeat. Hayate called the match, not wanting it to end in an unnecessary death. The winner of the match is Kankuro. Temari smiled, glad Kankuro was able to overcome the Kumo ninja, which had been a difficult task for them days earlier. Even back he was pleased as he stood and observed, noting that there wasn't a scratch on him. Miyosuke wiped his nose, unimpressed. Cloud Shinobi are bogus. Temari restrained the urge to punch him full in the face. The days as teammates, 2 years earlier even, had not been happy ones. Miyosuke was always provoking him, causing trouble, and certainly not very worried over anyone other than himself. So she wouldn't go as far as to say that they were friends. More like associates. Disdainful associates. Kankuro averted his eyes from Gaara during his return to the balcony, feeling some indescribable pain raking at his gut. It hurt that their brother had to live his life in another village. It hurt even more that before the exam's end, Konoha was scheduled to be invaded. Needless to say, Kankuro was having second thoughts and so was Temari. Gaara had found a new home and they had yet to decide if they were willing to destroy it. The board overhead flashed a pair of names that startled Team 2. Hayate read aloud the next combatants. The fifth battle will be between Sosumi Miyosuke and Gaara. Naruto and Haku turned to him, wide-eyed and grinning. They knew there was no way he was about to lose this match. Gaara blinked at him, accepting their confidence in him, and turned to go down, ready as ever. Jiraiya smirked at the red-haired boy as he stalked off, kick some A, Gaara. Leaf Genin had their eyes set on Gaara as he ventured down. No one was more apprehensive than Sakura. She swallowed audibly, wanting to wish him luck, but discovering that her voice had abandoned her. Gaara-kun, just don't do anything too rash. From the beginning Gaara had found Miski's attitude repulsive, especially in regards to his teammates. He was admittedly glad he had been selected a challenger worthy of a severe beating. Although he hadn't quite expected the mousy Sand Nin's thorough knowledge of him. Miski's voice was a low hiss, something only Gaara could hear. Hey there, Ichibi-chan. From above, Temari and Kankuro found themselves unable to speak. They could tell somehow that Gaara intended to show little mercy to their arrogant teammate and they didn't blame him for it either. However this turns out, Kankuro thought, it won't be good. By the time Hayate had advised them to begin, sand was pouring out of Gaara's gourd, and Miyosuke had put a large distance between himself and his foe, ready for long-range combat. Let's see if you're really as tough as they say you are. Miyosuke barked, readying his enormous boomerang, Jetstream S. The ivory and red arc shot across the room, creating a fierce shockwave in its wake. The resulting gust nearly knocked a few nearby genin off of their feet. Gaara stood very still, scowling with his arms folded. He had seen this jutsu before. His sand reached it halfway, swarming around the boomerang, and by the time it had even gotten close to Gaara, it had been stopped fully. With a clatter, the arc dropped to the floor, useless, and unable to return to its master. The mousy antagonist was troubled, but just as talkative. You know, it isn't very fair that you have that sand advantage of yours when you aren't even of Suna anymore. Gaara's eyes widened, wondering how much his opponent would dare to expose about him. Can it you Naruto howled, sharing Gaara's fear. Just shut your mouth. What does he think he's doing? Temari hissed, giving a worried look to her mentor. He'll ruin the mission. If he even tries it, Baki growled in response, just as displeased. I'll end this match myself. Lee turned to his own sensei, confused. What is that sand ninja's meaning? Gaara-kun is not originally of the Leaf Village. It was something Neji had assumed on his own, but Tenten had never suspected that a genin could hail from a different village. Guy figured it was best not to lie. No, Lee. Gaara arrived here many years ago when he was a young child. He gestured over to the remainder of Team 2. The same can be said for young Haku-kun as well, who is rumored to have been born nearby the Mist Village. How fascinating. Lee didn't object to the idea at all. But sensei, why would they be forced to leave their own villages and come here? Tenten asked, still finding it odd. That Tenten, I am afraid, is confidential. Guy answered, his voice stern, their past lives are none of our business. Miski's attention had turned to Naruto, who was yowling down at him from the upper level. He hadn't expected someone to defend the secret of Shukaku's container so fervently. What does it matter to you? Miyosuke spat, his wicked eyes connecting with Naruto's fiery blue ones. Monsters like this deserve to be exterminated. You have no idea of what you speak, you idiot. Gaara's sand had impacted him. See his rant short and barreling him over. Miyosuke struggled to his feet again, fuming. He'll be wanting his weapon back, seeing as he has no skill in close quarters, Gaara predicted, untying his gourd and letting it fall to the floor with a thud. If I catch him by surprise, he will be all too easy to defeat, being he's so distracted. After all, Miski's words would not win him the match. Gaara was more about action. Jiraiya eyed the crater Gaara's sand gourd had formed incredulously. Yeesh. What is that kid thinking? He could injure himself carrying around all that weight. Sakura's eyes widened, much like Kiba's had, who stood next to her. She had no clue as to what he was planning. Since when did he get this strong? I know he said he and Naruto-kun have been improving their taijutsu, but could he be overdoing it a little? Gaara's sand swarmed over the earthbound boomerang, obscuring it from sight. Miyosuke ground his teeth together in frustration. I can't take him close range. If I don't get Subakura back, this may take longer than I expected. Come on, you bastard. Miyosuke hurled an alarming number of kunai and shuriken with accuracy, and Gaara didn't bother to avoid them. To the mousy shinobi's horror, his projectiles bounced off of Gaara futilely, leaving him unharmed. But how? Sand armor. Haku muttered, smirking. It will slow him down though. It's heavy and consumes a lot of chakra. He's sure to discard it soon. Looks like that sand creep isn't so tough after all. Naruto snorted, folding his arms. Gaara, being a courteous ninja, decided that Miyosuke could not be crushed to a pulp when he was the teammate of his siblings. Still, he wouldn't hesitate to beat him into submission. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow as Gaara's sand armor peeled away from him and he rushed at the stunned sand ninja, who found he was out of shuriken. I thought he could only fight with sand. Temari whispered, having never seen Gaara utilize hand-to-hand combat skills. It was almost fulfilling to watch Miyosuke stumble as he received a jab in the gut, and double over in pain after Gaara delivered a fierce roundhouse kick. Looks like he's learned a thing or two while he's been here. Kankuro surmised, giving her a lopsided smile. He too found it amazing. Yeah, Gaara. Naruto's cheers were far louder than anyone else's, though only a margin above Sakura's. Miski's pathetic block was broken and he was sent crashing into the wall a moment later, his eyes watering. He touched his sea gingerly, wondering if any of his ribs had been broken. This freak, he's using that thing's chakra to make his blows stronger, I bet. Woohoo. Lee's excitement radiated off him, just like in our training Gaara-kun. The battered sand ninja slid down the wall, exhausted, wiping the bee from his lip. Gaara knew there wasn't much more he could take. He turned away, sand gathering around him in weight. Proctor, hey, it looked to Gaara from the sidelines. Call the match. It seemed that it was something he was already considering without Gaara having to tell him. Miyosuke, seizing his chance, drew back on the chakra strings he had concealed, pulling Subakura back to him frighteningly fast. Gaara stood near his gourd, not intimidated. The Sand Nin's eyes lit up with new hope as his hands closed around his beloved boomerang, and they narrowed at Gaara as he stood shakily, calculating his next move. He must enjoy pain, Gaara thought blandly, not interested in fighting any longer. Ninja like him don't survive long anyway. Miyosuke gripped Subakura eagerly. You filthy monster. I'm surprised they kept you here at all outside of a cage. He couldn't stop his rambling mouth, and he gave a brief glare up to his teammates. Temari and Kankuro said that you are 10 times the ninja that I am. Miyosuke smirked to himself, but I don't make a habit of listening to demon-loving traitors. Few noticed the looks that came over both Kankuro and Temari's faces. If Miyosuke so much as even hinted about the presence of the one-tailed beast again, they'd aid Baki with disciplining the fool. That idiot. Naruto was furious. Do you hear the trash that guy's talking? If it wasn't Gaara-kun's match I'd. Relax Naruto, it's not your fight. Jiraiya patted the blonde's head, quieting him, so he knows more than he should, but his knowledge is the only leverage he has against Gaara. Do you really think he'd throw the match if someone threatened his secret? Well, no. Naruto frowned, but he'd still be pissed. That's true, and the Hokage, did he make a law preventing others from learning about Gaara's demon like he has for Naruto? Haku asked curiously. In fact he did. No one who already does know is allowed to tell anyone, not even you two, Jiraiya pointed out matter-of-factly. Actually, only Gaara may tell another, so it's not likely to spread around the village as a piece of gossip, if you get my meaning. Gaara hardly spoke, let alone gossiped. Naruto returned his gaze to the cloud of sand Miyosuke was swiping at with his boomerang. It was pointless, he and Haku could tell. The sand was already gathering around the loudmouth, poised to finish him. Wow, he got Gaara pretty mad. Miyosuke had realized that throwing his boomerang again would only leave him defenseless against his foe sand, but there was little he could do to protect himself at all. Stubbornly, he refused to withdraw, even when Gaara's sand had clustered around his flailing arms. The red-haired boy scowled as he closed his fist, exercising an abnormal amount of control as he crushed only Miski's arms, leaving his teammates to attempt to ignore his screams. Hinata turned away, hating the violence. Sato stood beside her, fascinated by Gaara's strategy. The winner is Gaara. Hayat's voice could barely be heard over the Sand Nin's wails. He did use excessive force. Haku said softly, concerned. He could tell Gaara had issues with the Sand team other than the fact they were of his old village, though it seemed more than ever he'd be unwilling to talk about it. Gaara returned, hostile, and stood beside Jiraiya. His teammates knew better than try to make a conversation when his mood was ruined. His match had been an easy win, no doubt, but Miyosuke had unearthed old wounds that stung like they never had before. The mousy antagonist was taken away by medic Nin who were unable to quell his agonized cries. Naruto sighed deeply, scratching his head. Oh man. Gaara-kun, he really wanted to K that kid. He probably would have if he'd said anything in front of everyone about the Naruto-kun, look. Haku pointed over to the screen where his name had appeared. The blonde's brooding thoughts melted away. All right. Finally I'm up. This is gonna be great. Predictably, Hayat called down the next two contestants. The sixth match will be between Uzumaki Naruto and Inuzuka Kiba. Naruto gave a foxy grin to his teammates before leaping over the railing. Oh yeah. I am totally ready for this match. I hope Sakura-chan doesn't mind if I kick dog breaths B. Do your best, Naruto-kun. Hinata's faith was with the blonde-haired boy in this match, whether he knew it or not. Kiba, from across the way, believed his match would end quickly. Hey. Check it out Akamaru. We're up against the kid. Looks like we lucked out. Kiba-kun, Sakura's pastel eyebrows knitted together in a frown. I don't think you should be underestimating Naruto. I mean, he's come a long way. Oh right. He didn't want her to fret about it, I promise. Sakura-chan, I won't bust him up too bad. I know he's a friend of yours. Akamaru barked in friendly agreement before they ventured down, Kakashi stifling a chuckle. He really could be a bit more humble. The pink-haired girl thought, knowing she'd be unable to cheer for either side during the match. Her head felt heavier and her gut churned in anxiety. This is a crappy matchup. Why did it have to be Naruto-kun of all people? I can't stand it. Sakura leaned her head against the Uchiha prodigy's shoulder with a disconcerted sigh. Rather than shrugging her off, he replied to her nonsensical grunt, "It is what it is, Sakura. There's nothing that can be done about it now." "I know," she muttered irritably, "I just don't want to watch this fight." "Then close your eyes." On cue, she felt her eyelids droop. "Oh. Sasuke didn't have to think hard to find a solution for her problems, and it annoyed her slightly. Curious, her forest eyes flickered over his features, wondering if her physical contact was bothering him yet. His arms were folded, a sign that he was high-strung, but other than that he was surprisingly acquiescent with the contact. Obediently, Sakura shut her eyes a moment later, trying not to think about it. Hayate announced the start of the match. "Begin." "Here we go." Naruto immediately created 4 shadow clones, ready to coordinate an attack. Kakashi raised a silver eyebrow. "Shadow clones? It isn't a common ability for genin. It seems training with Jiraiya has really paid off for him and his teammates, but Kiba will still be a tough opponent to beat." "Sit tight, Akamaru, while I set things up," Kiba growled down to his companion who waited beside him, tail wagging in excitement. He ran ahead, tossing a smoke bomb in the midst of the clones, lessening visibility. "I can't fight if I can't see, better get out of here." Naruto made a grab for the nearest clone as he felt Kiba rush past him recklessly, nearly hitting him. Naruto dove up and out of the cloud, while his clones tumbled out of it, waiting for Kiba to reappear. He's gone into this fight with a strategy. Haku smirked inwardly, foreseeing Naruto's plan. "I believe he's even used this attack pattern on me once before. It isn't pleasant." Kiba tore out of the dark cloud with terrifying speed and shredded the nearest clone. The action had riled Akamaru up, who raced over to him, wanting in on the beatdown. While Kiba's attention was set on the clones, Naruto used the stolen time to hurl 4 kunai at Kiba from overhead, with exploding tags attached. Predicting the assault, his shadow clones leapt back, avoiding the blast, as did Kiba and Akamaru, though slightly singed. "Those were the last of my tags. I'll have to ask Sato for more," Naruto mentally noted while creating 2 shadow clones beside him as he descended, which flung him at Kiba, who was unprepared for the random attack. The QB container landed a flying punch on Kiba's face, who knocked him away shortly after. One of the shadow clones had gotten a hold of Akamaru, who nipped furiously at the surrounding, grinning replications. Kiba, it was visibly clear, had a change in his plans. "Naruto, if you're smart, you'll let Akamaru go." He tossed a pill at his dog, who caught and swallowed it and then ate one himself. The clone that had been holding Akamaru hostage observed inquisitively as the dog's fur turned red, and was then destroyed with one swift kick from the animal's hind legs. Kakashi smirked from beneath his mask. Sakura's eyes remained closed, but she could tell things were getting serious as she felt Sasuke's shoulder tense from beneath her cheek. The little red dog leapt up, teeth bared, and blew apart 2 more of Naruto's nearby clones. The last 2 shadow clones stood on either side of the real blonde, regrouping. "What the hell? It's like the dog has superpowers or something." Akamaru raced back to Kiba, who kneeled down for him, and leapt onto his back, his crimson fur on end. The Inuzuka boy formed hand seals, ready to get serious. "Beast human clone." Akamaru transformed into the spitting image of Kiba, who leapt off of his master's back, itching to fight. Naruto's eyes widened. "Okay. I didn't see that coming. Better take out the real Kiba, and then his mutt won't have a chance." Naruto sent one of his clones to charge Kiba and his double as a distraction, while the other stayed near him as he hastily began to form the Rasengan. Back up on the balcony, Haku and Gaara observed, wanting to get a better look at the new technique Naruto had revealed days earlier to them. Jiraiya folded his arms and chortled to himself, knowing that if his student did land the attack on his opponent, it wouldn't fall short of O. Kakashi's visible eye widened in shock, dancing within it distant memories of his old mentor. Gatsuga. Both Kiba and Akamaru threw themselves into a coordinated spinning attack, easily eliminating the oncoming clone. Naruto's final shadow clone ran ahead of him. It intended to draw Kiba and his companion nearer so Naruto would have a more accurate shot at them. It happened nearly too quickly to see, Kiba, raking the last clone apart and the real Naruto catching one of Kiba's 2 replications, the Rasengan into the nearest foe's gut. Kiba went flying backward, and his counterpart skidded to a frantic halt. Akamaru reappeared, an instant knockout. Ah well, there was only a 50-50 chance of getting the real one anyway. Naruto muttered, wishing to have finished the true Kiba. It left many genin and junin alike stunned. The Hokage himself, who had been watching aloofly, looked to Jiraiya with a disapproving smile on his face. What the heck was that? Sato blurted out loud, Naruto-kun just totally annihilated Akamaru. The Rasengan. Hinata clarified for her team. She was in awe, despite having seen it before. Sato gave her an astonished look, wondering how she had known. You. Kiba's voice was a low growl, schooled with rage, before he attacked Naruto again, Gatsuga. He hit Naruto full force, sending him crashing to the floor. After a short, painful tumble, Naruto stood again and wiped the bee from his arm, as Kiba slowed and turned around to attack again. The blonde cringed at the gash running up his arm, freely, he's pissed alright, but I'm not out of ideas yet. Naruto created half a dozen more clones as Kiba came back at him, howling in outrage. 2 clones were devastated by his assault, but one lucky clone got behind Kiba as he slowed and managed a fierce, unexpected kick that sent the Inuzuka boy upward. The remaining clones followed through with the attack, leaving no room for Kiba to counter. Naruto leapt above his shadow clones and hit Kiba squarely in the face with one final kick that knocked him down to the concrete floor. Drops of bee splattered as Kiba made no move to get up. Hayate didn't have to examine Kiba long to know that he was no longer able to continue fighting. The winner of the match is Uzumaki Naruto. Ha ha. Yes. I knew I'd come out on top. Naruto's ecstatic chatter followed thereafter as he then returned to the balcony. All the while, Haku and Jiraiya cheered ecstatically for the blonde while Gaara opted for quieter congratulations. Open your eyes now, Sasuke instructed, knowing the battle had ended in her favor. He himself had expected Kiba to be defeated, though not by such a powerful display. Exhaling, Sakura opened her eyes and smiled at Naruto's victory. I know Kiba-kun will be okay. For the most part, Kakashi interjected, finding the interaction between his 2 remaining students curious, though the technique Naruto used against Akamaru was for Kiba, so you can imagine the pain the little fellow is in right now. She frowned, hoping the small puppy would be able to recover from the blow. Passing by Team 8 up on the balcony earned Naruto an O of congratulations. Sato remained blissfully unaware of the blonde boy's suspicious look at the 2 short blades he had with him. Awesome fight, Naruto-kun. Shino, who stood recovering beside his silver-haired teammate, gave a nod to him in his usual quiet way, though it seemed more approving than previous ones. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Thanks. He tried to be polite. Hey Shino, your fight with fuzzy brows was pretty cool. Naruto-kun. Hinata was wearing a bright smile. You should take this. She held out a small container to him which he regarded quizzically. Oh, thanks Hinata-chan. He grinned at her, accepting it. What is this stuff? Kurenai was also smiling. It's a healing ointment, Naruto. Go ahead and use it, you've earned it. Down below, Medic Nin escorted Kiba and Akamaru away. Upon rejoining his team, Naruto was already rubbing the ointment on his already healing wound, amazed by its effects. He then smirked at Haku and Gaara. So what did you think of that? Jiraiya patted Naruto's head again. I'd say all of your training has paid off. Haku nodded in agreement. It really has, Naruto-kun. You did very well. Personally, seeing his teammates' performances only made Haku more nervous of his own match. I just hope I don't make a fool of myself. Not after Naruto-kun and Gaara-kun have won. To Haku's dismay, his name appeared on the board readout a minute later. It was funny, he thought, how he could stress over something until the time finally came to act. His teammates were clearly pleased and wished him luck before he went down, doing a last-second count of how many senbon he had with him. The next match will be between Abumizaku and Haku. Hayate announced as the contenders proceeded out to the middle of the floor. Naruto cheered fanatically from above, and like he, many Leaf Genin were pulling for Haku. Haku had only noticed once they were facing off that his opponent, a sound ninja, had both of his arms in slings. The dark-haired boy frowned, unable to stop himself from being sympathetic. He's been this badly injured and he's still competing. This exam is brutal. I don't know if I want to be the kind of shinobi who preys on the weak. Begin. Hey, its voice seemed distant. Before we begin, I would advise you to withdraw, Haku suggested to his opponent. There's no sense in a struggle that will only worsen your injuries. He's awfully nice to his foe. Shikamaru muttered, finding Haku's nobility rather impractical. This was an opportune battle, an easy win. It was only because Sasuke had gone a bit overboard in the Forest of Death when Sakura had been ambushed. Zaku would never make that mistake again. Zaku, not in the least dissuaded, glowered at Haku, save your pity. You think I can't fight? Hey, it looks like I've got some movement in this arm. Zaku's left arm shuddered out of the sling, his glare still focused on the dark-haired ninja. I'll win this match yet. Haku, though surprised, decided that if there was no convincing him that his opponent would have to learn the hard way. Sakura felt anxiety creep over her as she watched Haku face off against one of the sound ninja who had ambushed her team days before. That's the one that Sasuke-kun throttled. She remembered vividly how Sasuke had woken from his coma and used an inhuman sort of power to scare off the team of sound nin. The pink-haired girl frowned, stealing a glance at the mark on her teammate's N. What happened back there? It definitely has something to do with that weird mark. What did Orochimaru want with Sasuke-kun? Haku began by throwing 6 senbon at his opponent, who raised his shaking arm up to defend himself. Sound wave. The sound waves he emitted knocked the needles away before they even came near him. Haku's eyes widened. I've never seen a jutsu like this. Pressurized air is coming out of the hole in his hand. He frowned. It is both strange and problematic. He held back, deciding to learn more about his foe before attacking again. That's it. Out of tricks already. Zaku was becoming increasingly confident. I'll end this match right now. The sound shinobi fired continuous jets of air from his hand, chasing Haku around the arena. Fortunately, he was agile as ever and easily avoided the sound waves. His senbon were utterly useless against an enemy who could knock them away without even trying. It's futile to get nearer with those blasts. I'll have to use a jutsu. Haku formed hand seals and above on the balcony Orochimaru smirked. Demonic crystal ice, as he drew on his chakra, Haku's into some sort of painful inhibitor, disabling the jutsu. He stumbled, his breath stolen from the immense pain shooting through his N. What's happening? The remainder of Team 2 was immediately concerned. Naruto turned to Jiraiya. What's he doing? Is he still sick or something? Jiraiya frowned to himself, unsure of what had stalled Haku. The dark-haired boy's pause cost him sound wave. Zaku's attack hit him fully, barreling him over. Haku's head was spinning and he was completely disoriented by the blast. His dark hair splayed over his shoulders as he tried to regain his bearings. Haku-kun. Hinata looked on, immensely worried. She was also aware of the troubled expressions both Naruto and Gaara wore. Haku-kun. Come on. Naruto barked from above, you can take this guy. The dark-haired boy stood again, shaken, desperate to find a way to fight back. What's happening to me? It's this thing. He touched the seal on his N, trying to understand how it worked. It won't let me draw on my own chakra. Zaku, though unsure of what had slowed his opponent, continued to fire sound blasts at him. Jiraiya frowned, certain that something was wrong. Haku, if you've gone into this fight in any way impaired, you'll have me to answer to. Haku kept moving, trying to come up with a solution. There's got to be some way I can counter this mark. It's as if he avoided another sound wave, but could still feel the sting where the air had near his shoulder. In that moment his desperation was great enough for him to draw on the cursed seal, even if he hadn't fully meant to. Orochimaru watched, delighted, as black scales began to creep up the boy's N and cheek, and a dark chakra radiated off of him as he slowed, feeling rejuvenated. Naruto, baffled, looked to an equally astounded Gaara and then to his sensei whose enraged face was turning many different shades. Haku found the new chakra strange, but it didn't stop him from proceeding with his original plan, demonic crystal ice mirrors. He had only created 2 ice mirrors, one stationed ahead of Zaku and the other behind him. They were tinted a pale indigo, with jagged edges rather than the smooth sheets of ice he was normally able to make. It was enough to make Gaara speculate, what is he doing? They've never looked like that before. Don't ask me. Naruto scratched his head, as clueless as his red-haired friend. Something is definitely up. What's happening to me? Haku disliked his physical change. Orochimaru. He's got something to do with this. He fought against it as he raced to the nearest mirror, Zaku still standing in total confusion. No. I won't let this mark control me. I won't. The dark scales that had formed receded after a short-lived internal struggle, and by then he was safe inside his mirror. Naruto cheered as his friend vanished momentarily, and then reappeared in the reflection of the dark ice mirror, to the shock of nearly all watching, including the Sandaime. So you're gonna hide in there, huh? Zaku spat, assuming it was some sort of trick. I guess I'm just gonna have to that glass thing of yours then. His right arm, in worse condition than his left, somehow lifted from his sling, and Zaku aimed both of his arms at Haku's image, sound wave. The blast of air hit the mirror, but did not break it. It merely bounced back, at Zaku with an equal force. Stunned by his own attack, the sound ninja fell to his knees in pain, leaving himself open to a counterstrike. I've never seen Haku-kun do something like this before. Sakura was amazed. This is an ability that can only be used with his Kekkei Genkai, right, Kakashi-sensei? The silver-haired Junin had temporarily stopped reading his book just to watch the match. It is Sakura. No other ninja can use this jutsu, not even me. He paused. It's a unique technique that I've never seen before. Kakashi pulled up his Hitai 8, exposing his Sharingan eye, wanting to get a better view of Haku's movements. It was something that many of the Leaf Genin could not see. Haku darted with an untraceable speed between his two mirrors with Zaku in the middle and landed Senbon after Senbon at his helpless opponent. The Sound Nin was unconscious even before his face hit the cold floor, needles protruding from various pressure points Haku had targeted. It was precision work that Tenten had only thought Neji capable of, or herself, but it appeared Haku was more than adept at incapacitating his opponents with his unique ability. The dark-haired boy stepped out of his mirror, dispatching it, and reacquainted himself with the slower world. He looked up to Naruto and Gaara and smiled at their more than approving expressions. The winner is Haku, Hayate announced, his words followed shortly after by cheers from many of the Leaf Genin. Among those satisfied with the battle were also the Sand Team and Orochimaru, though Jiraiya was far from proud of his bright pupil. Once Haku had returned to the balcony, the Toad Sennin didn't even allow his teammates to congratulate him. Haku, come with me now. He had been, at that moment, riffling around his GI in hopes of finding a replacement for his hair tie which had snapped during his fight. Haku as well as Naruto and Gaara were hushed by the deep anger that was audible in Jiraiya's order. Although the dark-haired nin had wanted to stay to see the remainder of the matches, he knew better than to argue with his mentor when he was angry. Yes, sensei. He gave an unnerved parting look to his friends before following after their Junin instructor. What do you suppose Ero-sensei is so mad about? Naruto inquired of his remaining teammate, worried of what fate was in store for Haku. It has something to do with that thing on Haku's en. Gaara pointed out, still uncertain of what it did or how it had gotten there. You mean those black spots that showed up on him? The red-haired nin nodded. It was affecting his Kekkei Genkai during the match. It could be harmful in some way. If there were any further issues, he could only speculate. It's likely Jiraiya-sensei is going to remove it from Haku now. I sure hope he'll be alright. The blonde muttered. The two didn't notice the new names that appeared on the overhead board as they discussed what had so deeply bothered Jiraiya. After a short round of coughing, Hayate called out the next combatants. The 8th match will be between Haruno Sakura and Tenten. The surprise that dawned on the pink-haired girl's face was painfully obvious. Tenten. She's got to be the best Kunoichi who graduated last year. Sakura honestly knew little about her other than her amazing skill with weaponry. Well, it's better than having to fight Hinata-chan. If she were to face off against her pale-eyed friend, well, Sakura would much rather call the match. It was something her heart would be unable to take. Look sharp, Sakura. Kakashi smiled at her from behind his mask and she nodded to him brightly. Inwardly, however, the silver-haired Junin knew better than to underestimate Guy's students, least of all the Kunoichi of his team who, it was rumored, had already thrown down a number of rock ninja on a past mission. She needs to be cautious in this fight. I didn't train her to fend off weapon masters. Sakura felt lighter after receiving a confident nod from Sasuke and moved down to the main floor. The Uchiha prodigy then aimed a contemptuous glare at Tenten who, across the way, was also descending for the match. Lee's cries of encouragement rang after Tenten as she sulked off, wishing Neji could have at least attempted to not be indifferent about the development. She tried to clear her head and focus on Lee's advice. Harness your burning flames of youth, Tenten. Tenten focused on relaxing more than Lee's proclamations. Hayate glanced at either Kunoichi before backing away. You may begin when ready. Sakura. Tenten's eyebrows furrowed in concern. I don't want to hurt you. Give it all you've got. Sakura gave her a blissfully cheerful smile. I don't want either of us to do less than our very best. Tenten would have liked to have protested further and convinced her to concede, but Sakura had begun without her as she hesitated. The pink-haired girl hurled a handful of shuriken at her opponent as a starting diversion, while leaping back to add some space. Tenten deflected the projectiles expertly. Sakura frowned. If she's really as good as they say, it'll be more of an accomplishment defeating her than even Ino Pig. Yeah, Sakura-chan. Naruto grinned down as the pink-haired Kunoichi darted back from Tenten, forming hand seals. Gaara's eyes narrowed suspiciously when he observed for the first time that Sakura's hair was noticeably shorter, something that irritated him a great deal. Two clones formed on either side of the pink-haired ninja, hoping to confuse Tenten, who had already thrown two infallible kunai at the duplications. To Sakura's annoyance, they were destroyed nearly as soon as they had been created. Tenten tightened her grip on her kunai, looking for an opening. That can't be all she's got. I know that she has a plan of some kind. Oh, what the? The bun-haired girl felt a strong sensation of dizziness catch her off guard as her head swam in a fog. Sakura paused for a moment, glad that her genjutsu had taken effect. It was the first time she had used it. She was unsure if it had been successful, being that she herself had no direct control over her opponent's visions. The victim created their own illusion, Kakashi had told her after demonstrating it, that being the reason it was so unpredictable. It was a slightly more advanced technique specifically for surfacing things in the foe's mind that they feared the most, trivial or profound. Sakura waited, noticing Tenten's movements slow. Tenten shook her head from side to side momentarily as her vision became focused again. Good, now back to business. She raised her kunai again, moving ahead to catch the pink-haired girl. She found something different. Tenten saw herself, though at first she hadn't quite been able to recognize it. The familiar posture and hairstyle came to her attention. Her doppelganger's back was turned from her and she halted again, perplexed. What? Wait, I didn't make a clone or... She saw Sakura again. Her double had plunged the knife into the pink-haired Kunoichi's tea, not in the least bit reluctant. It was a motion so practiced she was certain that she had actually done it. Sakura fell to the floor, completely still, but the proctor did not call the match. Tenten didn't even bother to look around for Hayate, because she was preoccupied with the horror of her physical double's attack and how Lee leapt down and ran to Sakura, futilely. The doppelganger then moved to Lee, fluidly, gracefully, and Tenten felt her voice catch in her tea like a fluttering bird as her reflection aimed a downward S at his back. No, don't. Guy, furious and uncomprehending, descended after Lee tumbled down on top of Sakura in a heap. Her sensei knocked the kunai out of the double's hand, ready to pummel her, but the sword in the left hand had gone unnoticed until Guy had been skewered. Tenten's legs were locked. Stop it. You can't. I won't. It shouldn't have been that easy. It couldn't have been. Tenten then saw the face of her malicious doppelganger lit with childish delight. Countless other ninja had by then jumped down, reluctant to go near the crazed Kunoichi. Tenten was beginning to wonder if they could even see her. What she wished wouldn't have happened did in fact occur. Her last teammate appeared, his fierce eyes teeming with the power of the Byakugan. Neji moved to the double without fear, hands poised to strike Tenketsu. The sword moved downward again with freakish speed and Tenten was moving, at last, seizing her double and grappling with the B-demon even as Neji struck them both brutally, unable to tell the two apart. As if they were one and the same. The same. The blade was L down her arm, aimed for the Hyuga prodigy. Tenten felt no physical pain, but she couldn't on top of the guilt that was clawing its way up through her tea. I won't let you. You aren't me. I would never do this. The fog came back and Neji vanished, even as she reached out frantically with her cries unheard. Sakura's genjutsu had only lasted about 2 seconds, much to her disgruntlement, and the pink-haired girl found it intriguing how it had frozen the opposing Kunoichi in her tracks. She then planned her next course of action as Tenten began to come to. Lee turned to Guy again. Guy-sensei, what has happened to Tenten? Will she be all right? I can't say that I know, Lee, Guy frowned, though it appears she has now overcome the genjutsu. Kakashi's Sharingan eye narrowed after sneaking a peek at the effects of Sakura's attempted genjutsu. I'm sure that has to be disturbing. What has Guy been doing to evoke such a fear in his own student? This is serious. I didn't know any of Guy's students were this capable of K yet. He pulled his Hitai 8 back down over his red eye. Sasuke, the Uchiha prodigy, looked up at Kakashi when he had been addressed. This is more dangerous than I thought. What are you talking about? He was annoyed with his teacher. As usual, Sakura's holding up well. It isn't Sakura who's the problem. The Junin answered, though Sasuke still didn't understand his meaning. Tenten straightened herself, back in reality. Her eyes were dark. A hail of kunai and shuriken shot forward unexpectedly, and Sakura barely had time to substitute as she avoided the storm of weapons. I guess my jutsu didn't work. She's just as strong as ever. Sakura gave a crack at another genjutsu, creating dozens of replications of herself, completely surrounding Tenten. Maybe this will slow her down. Sakura had unwittingly pushed Tenten to her psychological limits. Tenten procured 2 familiar scrolls on reflex, not even noticing the horrified look on Guy's face. Rising twin dragons. The weapons specialist leapt up, hurling various weapons at the numerous pink-haired replications encompassing her. Sakura-chan. Naruto's eyes widened in alarm as the blades rained down, and he turned to Gaara. What does that girl think she's doing? She's gone crazy. Gaara couldn't say he disagreed with the idea. Tenten had suddenly become ruthless, almost panicked. Sasuke was finally beginning to see Kakashi's point. Even he would have trouble facing down someone who kept that many weapons with them. The genjutsu dispelled instantly once Sakura had been hit, and she did her best to avoid the last of the incoming projectiles, but with little luck. Tenten landed, aggression visible on her delicate features. She felt so violated, so horrified that someone had actually been able to exploit her true vulnerability. It's something that not even Neji had accomplished. Sakura removed a shuriken which had sunk into her shoulder, and ignored the many G. The onlooking genin watched apprehensively, unsure of what would happen. Kakashi knew that he may soon have to step in if Guy didn't, judging by the dark look on the taijutsu specialist's face. I won't give in, Sakura whispered, knowing that she still had a chance. I guess I can't save this for later like I wanted to. Sasuke's eyes narrowed, anticipating Sakura's next move, and Kakashi gave him a curious sideways glance. Her hand seals were hurried as she rushed blindly at Tenten, who was already drawing out another scroll. Kaiten, Grand Fireball Jutsu. Tenten had the present sense to leap out of the way before Sakura breathed a huge fireball that completely dumbfounded Naruto and Gaara. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at his student. Now I wonder where she picked that up from. Sasuke smirked, proud of her mastery of the jutsu. Sakura's attack ended a few moments later only for her to see, much to her terror, that Tenten had disappeared. Did I get her? Neji, being the most familiar with the tactic, was the first to look up. He was just in time to see Tenten summon her bow staff. She plummeted down and Sakura leapt back a split second before the bun-haired Kunoichi reappeared, unscathed by the fire jutsu. She avoided it. Tenten had always been an adept jumper. Naruto called down to her as Sakura blocked the first blow, but Tenten merely had to poke her gut to stun her before landing a knockout blow to the side of her head, which she found much more preferable than finishing her with another hail of knives. Sakura landed on the floor with a soft thud and Tenten frowned, upset with herself. I'm sorry, Sakura. I took this too far and you paid the price. The pink-haired girl didn't catch her apology. I should have had more control over myself. The winner is Tenten. Hayate stifled a cough after declaring her the victor. Gaara was very still at that moment, unable to take his eyes away from the pink-haired Kunoichi who had shocked him completely. Gaara-kun. Naruto gave him an incredulous look. Are you coming? The red-haired boy was silent. Tired of waiting, the blonde shinobi jumped down to Sakura, Sasuke having beaten him to her. Kakashi sighed aloud, grateful she hadn't been harmed any worse than she had been as Guy approached him, looking solemn. Kakashi. He turned his visible eye to Guy knowingly. Tenten did her best to hold back. I can assure you, Guy appeared deeply troubled. However, on a recent mission she was unfortunately forced to take a life. I know, Guy. I don't take it personally. The silver-haired man didn't want Guy to feel guilt over things beyond his control. Lee looked to Neji uncertainly, unsure of what to do. His first thought was to go see how badly Sakura had been injured, but he feared that checking on the pink-haired girl would offend his teammate who had fought against her. After using his better judgment, Lee decided to stay where he was. "Hey Sakura-chan," Naruto gave the pink-haired girl a small smile as she leaned against her teammate. Numerous wounds lined her pale skin. "You did awesome." Her head bobbed as she nodded, smiling back at him in response. Sasuke couldn't think of anything comforting to say, being he had his gaze locked on the weapons specialist as she returned to the upper level. The match should have been even. Something happened that made that knife freak panic around Sakura. His glare intensified as Lee and Neji looked down at him, sensing the K-intent aimed for their teammate. Tenten was far too exhausted to pay any mind to the Uchiha as she trudged down the pathway, grateful she hadn't actually K anyone. Neji stared back down at him. His expression promised death if Sasuke made so much as a slight pass at Tenten. Tenten. Your battle was very impressive. Lee's congratulation was unsure and peculiarly quiet. Are you feeling all right? I am, Lee. Her reply was gloomy, not at all like her normal tone of voice. She settled between her teammates and leaned on the railing, feeling slightly ill as she noticed Guy exchanged a word with Kakashi across the way. Great. I've caused a problem for Sakura's team. What's wrong with me? Why did I have to freak out like that? Her anxiety doubled when her eyes locked with Neji's, almost as if he had seen right through her facade. It was as if he could tell what had unnerved her during her battle, even if there was no evidence of it. To her relief, he spoke. It was no contest, Tenten. Your skill is above that of any other leaf Kunoichi. Tenten briefly wondered for a moment if she had misheard. Did he just praise me? Like he actually thinks I did something right. It was an absurd notion, although it was accurate. She nodded, giving him the most cheerful smile she could muster. Thanks, Neji. It was a heady feeling, having the Hyuga prodigy name her the most skilled Kunoichi right out of his own biased opinion. The fluffy, warm feeling ebbed away after she noticed Lee behind her nodding sagely, approving of Neji's confidence in her. Naruto reappeared beside Gaara, knowing better than to say anything. He knew that more than anyone, Gaara had wanted to be the first to rush to Sakura's side, but he was so emotionally crippled at the time it was difficult enough just to speak to Naruto. Gaara kept his gaze away from his brother and sister, wondering how he was supposed to explain their presence to his friends. Hinata stood beside Kurenai, sadness visible in her silvery white eyes. Sakura-chan, please feel better soon. I know Tenten-san never meant for you to come to harm. Hayate called down the next two shinobi displayed on the board. The next match will be between Akamaiki Chuji and Kinyuta Dosu. Chuji's stomach growled audibly and he frowned, not looking forward to facing one of the sound ninja he and his teammates had encountered in the Forest of Death. Sensei, why don't I just withdraw from this match? Or, giving up so soon? Asuma smirked down at his hefty pupil. Even if I take you to an all-you-can-eat buffet if you win, Chuji. Ino joined in, wanting to motivate him. Yeah, chubby. What do you say? Ino, I'll finish this guy quick and then teach you a lesson. A mix of anger and determination was engraved on his face and he immediately went down to the main floor. Shikamaru sighed, knowing it was a match he was not intended to win. Begin. Hayate backed away and Chuji didn't waste a second while performing his trademark jutsu. Human bullet tank. Chuji transformed himself into the human equivalent of a steamroller that could have landed a devastating attack on Dosu, had he not been moving so slowly. The sound ninja dodged his rolling attack with no effort and merely led him along until he crashed into a wall. My sound amplifier is the only thing I need to finish you, Dosu announced, brandishing the device attached to his arm. You can't hurt me if I can't hear you. Chuji hadn't heard Dosu's warning, which may have been a bad thing. The sound ninja jabbed Chuji's gut with the amplifier, letting the ultrasonic waves course through his body. It didn't take long before Chuji had fallen unconscious, and Hayate had announced Dosu as the winner. Ino frowned. Darn. I thought getting him mad might have helped him win. Being angry is one of the worst ways to fight your battles. Shikamaru replied lazily, offering her some wise advice that Chuji could have definitely used. Temari exchanged a nonplussed glance with Kankuro, not expecting a match to be so short. Hey, check it out Gaara-kun. One of those sound ninja made it. Naruto hadn't expected anyone from the team of Oto Ninja to proceed past the preliminaries. His friend made no reply and Naruto faced him fully, miffed. Hey, are you listening to me? I know you're upset about Sakura-chan, but she's gonna be okay. You really should. Naruto, the next match will be starting soon. Gaara gestured to the overhead board and Naruto compliantly glanced over to it. Kurenai closed her eyes briefly, sighing, Hinata, I will let you proceed in whatever way you judge to be right. This is your match after all. The shy Hyuga girl was abnormally calm. Thank you, sensei. Her behavior earned her quizzical looks from both of her teammates. As expected, Hayate called out the next two ninja. The 10th match will be between Hyuga Hinata and Hyuga Neji. Naruto felt his heart break as the examiner announced the next match. No. This isn't right. Not Hinata-chan. Anyone but her. They're cousins, so why would they? Why does it have to be this way? The golden-haired nin watched as Neji moved down from the balcony, his face as stoic as it had been before. Naruto felt his lips peel back into a frustrated snarl, not comprehending how the Hyuga prodigy could not be troubled. Looks like he's not too upset. What does he think he's supposed to do anyway? I can't believe this. He turned to his crimson-haired friend, totally distraught. Gaara-kun, there's no way that they. You know that we are utterly incapable of interfering. Gaara knew exactly how he was feeling. This match is going to be a clash of rivals, all for the sake of an old feud. But there's no way this fight was random. I mean, it's the both of them. Naruto's anxious ocean eyes were beginning to unnerve his friend as well. What are the chances? There's just no way. Gaara could not find the words. I have no foresight on the outcome of this match. Sato looked to Hinata as she swayed where she stood beside Shino, she herself quite stunned. Are you gonna be okay, sunshine? A small smile appeared on her face. I'll be alright. He nodded to her before she moved on, stealing her nerves and feeling something like lead weighing her stomach down. Kurenai's ruby gaze flickered over to Guy, where both he and his students looked on grimly as Neji arrived on the main floor first. Is Neji actually going to go through with this? Tenten wondered if perhaps she should have asked him before he had left. There's no way she'll be able to withstand him. She doesn't know him like I do. Heel. She clenched her fists, fearing for Hinata. He won't hesitate to crush her. Hayate wore a doubtful expression before starting the match. You may begin. Hinata faced her cousin nervously, desperately clinging to her resolve, her inspiration, and everything that Naruto had taught her. She felt like she was drowning in her own ideals, with no hope of treading the sea of expectations her father had swamped her with. Neji's white eyes settled on her, uncommonly soft, yet no less threatening. Hinata-sama. She felt her chin snap up in response. She already knew what he was going to say. Hinata-sama, there is no one in our clan that I respect more than you. Neji's sincerity had floored her completely. However, if you do not withdraw, this match will hardly count as a match at all. I can't. Her voice was like a fragile pane of glass. I cannot do that, Neji-nisan. He found it strange that she was not as controllable as she most often was. I am grateful to you, Hinata, but I can no longer have you influencing my future. It is something that I must create on my own. Neji-nisan, as your rival, I do not strive to do my best as AL leader, but only to prove something to myself. Hinata looked up briefly to Naruto, trying to draw on the strength he had given her. You can prove nothing in this match against me, her cousin reminded her. You and I both know, Hinata-sama, which of us is destined to lead the Hyuga clan out of chaos. Chaos. In Sunshine's clan. Sato turned to Kurenai. Is there a fight going on or something, Kurenai-sensei? An old and bitter feud between the main and branch houses of the Hyuga clan has yet to be resolved, even after countless decades, she replied, sighing. Neji is the first branch member ever to rise as a candidate as the next leader of the Hyuga clan. Hinata has not told you about this because, within this notion lies her worst fear. Her fear? Shino prompted, unsure of her meaning. Yes, her fear of her father. He dictates her future depending on how quickly she gains skill as a ninja, Kurenai explained. If Hinata outmatches Neji there will be no repercussions for him, but if Neji defeats Hinata, her father has the final say on what happens to her. So what if she doesn't become the leader of her clan? Sato barked indignantly. Her dad wouldn't demote her in her own family, would he? Kurenai shook her head. I myself cannot be sure. This match dictates Hinata's fate. Neji Nisan, I will not concede, not when I must know if I've been able to change. Hinata's voice was soft but stern, defend yourself. Neji sighed heavily, tired of trying to persuade her, if that is what you believe, Hinata-sama, then it cannot be avoided. Lee's prominent eyebrows furrowed in concern as his eternal rival took an offensive stance, with his younger cousin mirroring him, neither willing to back down. I will not hold back. The Byakugan appeared in Neji's eyes automatically and Hinata frowned, her nervousness quickly being replaced with scraps of a plan. Tenten leaned on the railing, disbelief clear in her features. Lee, how can this be happening? There's just no way. He was unable to think of an answer for her, being he also was troubled. Neji watched intently as Hinata wove away from his Yukan strikes with grace, and paused abruptly when she formed a hand seal, a determined frown plastered on her face. Shadow Clone Jutsu. To her opponent's greatest astonishment, 3 shadow clones formed beside her, looking just as fierce as their creator. She must have learned that from Naruto. He is the only other genin capable of the jutsu. It was frustrating enough to admit that he could not discern the real Hinata from her duplications because her chakra was so expertly distributed. Go Hinata-chan. You've got this. Naruto's cheers were borderline screaming as he hung off the edge of the rail. Sato was also raving nearby. Both Lee and Tenten were pleasantly surprised alongside their mentor, not expecting Neji to be caught off guard by his cousin. Kurenai smiled broadly, flashing an appreciative glance to Naruto. I will do my best. Hinata moved in perfect coordination with her clones as they encircled Neji, countering and delivering relentless S of Yukan. 4 pairs of Byakugan eyes surrounded him, searching for weaknesses. To her shock, he was able to dodge many of the strikes from her clones even while attacking. It won't be long before Neji Nisan disposes of my cage Bunshin. She noted, evading a jab that might have knocked her out. I must do this quickly. Hinata and her clones leapt back, preparing to regroup. Neji fell back into his first stance, totally calm and expecting her next assault. Haka Rokujuyan Sho. Hinata cried as all of her clones closed in again with blinding speed. On her own, Hinata scarcely used the divine 64 palms, having only accomplished it once in front of her father, but had found after training in secret with her shadow clones, it was made all the more devastating when coming from all directions. Neji could certainly see the attack, but that did not mean he could counter it. She's really got him. Naruto mumbled in awe as the clones synchronized their attacks with Hinata, each focusing specifically on 16 different tenketsu all at once. Gaara stood beside him, equally amazed. Hakusho Kaiten. Tenten flinched involuntarily as Neji rotated, creating a 360-degree shield of chakra that blew apart the shadow clones instantly, forcing Hinata back as well. Tenten knew better than anyone how painful it was to be knocked away by the Hyuga prodigy. The Hyuga girl stumbled away from the crater Neji had formed and called on her Byakugan again, still not defeated. Distantly she could hear Naruto hollering from above, making her more bold. I can do this. I see it now. I've found my way. Hinata steadied her footing as Neji retaliated with powerful blows that were much more than small S of Yukan. Her evasion was faultless as she dodged away from his strikes, desperately trying to deliver her own, but with little success. Hinata's silvery white eyes burned with a determination akin to Naruto's. I will keep going. Neji Nisan is fighting back now. If I wear him down. Neji hadn't fully expected her to be so fiery in her attacks, but he knew that if the match persisted he would be forced to harm her more than what was necessary. I will end this match now. Blocking her assault, Neji landed a new that had sent her reeling, frantically trying to regain balance. He seized his chance to finish her, knowing that she would have done it no differently. Kaiten. It was a weaker rotation that was enough to position her in the air, where he struck her solar plexus expertly, watching as her eyes fluttered in reaction to the mind-numbing pain. He backed up, watching as she stumbled again, stunned, and tumbled down with a soft thud. The silence of the observing ninja hung thick in the air, even leaving the Hokage to speculate the meaning of the bout. Neji's Byakugan deactivated with a mere blink of his eyes. Don't you see, Hinata-sama? Your place as a leader of our clan was determined long before this match. Hayate frowned, not very much a fan of the Hyuga's brutal fighting style. He looked over to Hinata who was crumpled over in anguish, staying very still. He cleared his tea. Don't you dare call this match. Naruto howled from his place on the balcony, furious. Not yet. It's not over yet. Hayate gave the crazed boy an incredulous look before looking to Hinata again, where she had miraculously staggered to her feet, wiping the bee that was smeared on her mouth. Neji's eyes narrowed as they fell upon her shuddering form. He believed that a wise person would admit defeat when their bee could no longer continue. His cousin was not nearly so wise. The proctor remained silent but did not back away. It was clear the girl would not last much longer. Hinata coughed, flecks of bee polka dotting her jacket. Her eyes remained fixed on her cousin, open to a new truth that she had discovered while fighting him, Neji Nisan. The other Leaf Genin were astonished by her endurance. Neji Nisan. I know now what I fight for, why I am a ninja. She held her sides, her shoulders were quivering in pain. I need nothing more than my nindo, to never give up, but you, Neji Nisan. Her eyes were glassy. Do you even know what you're really fighting for? He said nothing, because in truth he didn't. Neji had never questioned the fact that he had been training tirelessly to become the heir of the Hyuga clan since his father's death, but it had never honestly been something he himself had wanted, not entirely. Once Hinata stumbled again, Hayate called the match without being interrupted. The winner is Hyuga Neji. Naruto and Sato had moved simultaneously, abandoning the balcony for the floor below. Hinata lay in agony on the floor, coughing up many more red spots onto her jacket. Guy sighed heavily, having predicted that the fight was fairly one-sided, no matter how formidable Hinata may have become. Even Lee had not yet defeated the Hyuga prodigy. Lee stood quietly beside Tenten, watching Neji with an unspoken dream as he left the main floor. Tenten averted her eyes from Hinata when Naruto kneeled down beside her, and she wondered if her teammates would have been as concerned for her if she had been defeated in her match. Her insides churned in horror as she sent her greatest sympathies to Hinata, the one with whom she could relate. Neji, you really don't know what you're fighting for, do you? She's right about you. You fight simply because you can, not because you fight for those you care about, if you care for anyone at all. Hinata felt humiliation creep over her as Naruto settled beside her, looking enraged. Naruto-kun, I'm sorry. I thought that if I could change. Whoa, wait, Hinata-chan, what do you think you're apologizing for? He grinned at her, trying to ignore the bee she was covered in. You were amazing. I didn't even feel this proud winning my own match. A smile of relief settled on her face. I'm glad. Her white eyes drifted closed shortly after, and Sato smirked down at her, glad she had given her cousin a run for his money. You did awesome, sunshine. Naruto made sure to advise the medic Nin to take extra good care of her as they prepared to escort her to the hospital. He looked up to Neji, his blue eyes wide in anger. I can't believe he did that to Hinata-chan. Even after she helped him. She was his friend and he shot her down. He grimaced, I will win. I'll beat him and make him see what it's like to struggle. Yo, Naruto-kun, I suggest you head up now. My fight is next. Sato smiled at the blonde-haired boy, snapping him out of his thoughts. Oh, right. Naruto hadn't noticed Sato's name had appeared on the board readout. Just don't screw up, you crazy idiot. Sure. Lee's congratulations to his teammate was prompt and a bit shaky. Neji. As expected, your skills are yet unequaled. The Hyuga offered him an imperceptibly raised eyebrow before turning to Tenten. He had at least anticipated her to grin mischievously at him or rant about some observation she had made of him, but she said nothing. Tenten stood silently beside Lee, disturbed by what she had witnessed. Her eyes were trained on Hayate, determined to pay Neji no mind. Neji found it dissatisfactory. It isn't like her to ignore me. She's being irrational. Displeased, he settled beside her, for once missing the approving words she often gave to him. Guy, on the other hand, was just as responsive as Lee. Neji, my prodigy. Well done. That was a splendid display of your youthful abilities. Neji frowned as Tenten remained quiet. Her silence indicated that she was nowhere near approving of what he had done. And it was something he regretted, if only a little. The next match will be between Hitaki Sato and Toshi. Hayate announced, eyeing the silver-haired boy curiously as he waved up to his team enthusiastically. It makes you wonder if Kakashi may look like him without the mask. He speculated, noticing the striking similarities between the two. Toshi, the second genin from the surviving team of Cloud Nin, leapt over the railing eagerly. He was sick of waiting for his fight. It came as a surprise to Sato, as well as a number of others, how closely the Kumo nin resembled Naruto, although his gold hair was tied back into a short ponytail. Watchful sapphire eyes locked onto Sato as the leaf ninja stood a short distance away, stretching thoroughly in preparation for the match. Kakashi made a sound of embarrassment at the sight of his ridiculous nephew, suspecting he had a few stunts to pull. Sasuke's eyes narrowed in thought, that just leaves the last Cloud Shinobi then for my match. If I watch carefully I may learn some of the techniques that my opponent will have. Before Hayate could tell him to begin, Sato raised his hand expectantly. Proctor sir. Can I just have a moment before we get going? The examiner shrugged in response while coughing, wondering what the boy could possibly do at the last second. Toshi scowled in impatience as Sato hastily retrieved a small thermos from his back pouch, confounding the whole of the audience with the exception of Kakashi, who merely saw it as a routine gesture. The silver-haired genin quickly guzzled down the last of the coffee he had saved for himself in hopes of replenishing his energy before his fight. What is he doing? Gaara was annoyed that he had actually expected Sato to have a serious fight, as far-fetched as it sounded. Naruto had been witness to Sato's coffee drinking habit and was able to identify it. You don't want to know. It's just too stupid. Sato tossed the empty thermos over his shoulder a few seconds later, satisfied, and Kurenai sighed as she caught it with ease from her place up on the balcony. Asuma smirked at her from a short distance away. Okay, I'm ready, Sato announced, giving a thankful grin to Hayate. The proctor frowned at him as he cleared his tea, then begin. He's just as weird as ever, that kid. Naruto muttered half to himself, there's no way he's strong enough to win this one. Without missing a beat, Sato had formed 3 unusual hand seals and produced 4 clones of himself. Naruto had picked up, however, that one of the seals that the leaf nin had used was similar to the seal required to create shadow clones. There's no way he can make shadow clones. I know he steals scrolls just as often as Haku-kun does, but he couldn't have learned that jutsu. Toshi took to an offensive stance, his broad physique clearly suggesting he was skilled in taijutsu, something that disappointed the leaf ninja. Sato and his replications drew out metal wires from their respective holsters and darted forward in full cooperation. The clones leapt clear over the Kumo nin's head and scattered throughout the room, securing the wires to walls with metal pegs and kunai. Sato moved directly to his opponent with a cry, in order to distract him from his clone's trap setting. Whatever trick you've got planned won't work on me. Toshi s his fist into Sato with S on accuracy and power, but only hit air. What? The smirking image of Sato faded away as Toshi skidded to a confused halt. It was genjutsu. Yup. The humiliated Cloud Shinobi turned around, seeing the true Sato all the way on the opposite side of the gymnasium. His duplications were still busy hanging kunai from the wires they had suspended. Kakashi chuckled to himself, it looks like he's gotten faster. It used to take him ages to set something up, and now he has an entire unit doing all the work for him. Maybe Guy's niece is rubbing off on him. I may not be big on the whole hand-to-hand combat gig, but I get by. Sato smiled openly as Toshi raced back at him with startling speed, and halted again when the once laboring clone Sato had created abandoned the places and dove for him wildly. Toshi retreated back, blocking their attacks, not expecting them to be solid. Sato leapt up with ease onto his suspended wire network with cat-like poise and drew a kodaki. Let's get started. With a gentle pluck, the blade severed a specifically chosen wire and let loose a flurry of shuriken that had been in plain sight. Wouldn't a trap be more effective if it was hidden? Maybe. Ino frowned, just as stupefied as many other shinobi by the silver-haired nin's strategy. Not always. A trap that the opponent is allowed to see is the one they react to, Asuma clarified, taking a short drag on his cigarette, which forces them into another trap. In unison, the clones evaded the projectiles, as did the Cloud Shinobi with little effort. Toshi had found himself back in the center of the gymnasium where he had started after he had avoided the first wave of attacks. Sato, in the midst of his scrambling clones, tossed a unique kunai that skimmed past his opponent, missing by inches. He frowned to himself, slightly upset, but continued on severing wires as he moved, not giving the Cloud Nin a chance to counter. One of the clones had been careless. Stumbling after being struck by a jab to the side, the stunned clone was hit again with a brutal sweep kick that destroyed it, and in turn, caused it to burst into flame. Toshi leapt back, confounded. What the? The intense fire flickered out where the clone had been eliminated, and in response, the rest of the replications and Sato perched up on the wire network, fearing they too would be pummeled. What was that? Temari narrowed her eyes in confusion. That was no ordinary clone. A fire clone, Baki muttered, impressed. Leaf shinobi seldom use such outdated techniques and it is a skill few master. Similar to shadow clones, fire clones are solid enough to strike an enemy and handle weaponry, but they have a major drawback that shadow clones don't. He has his students' full attention. Elementally they're unstable and burn themselves up only after a few short minutes, making them perfect for ninja who utilize traps and explosives. They looked back down as Toshi decided on a different method of destroying the last of Sato's clones, taking aim with kunai. Whoa, wait a minute. Sato leapt in unison with his clones, abandoning the wire they had been balanced on, which was then snapped by the oncoming projectiles. The Kumo Nin had sprung Sato's own trap and both Cloud and Leaf Shinobi were scrambling around avoiding the metal darts that were raining down. It easily finished two of Sato's clones, leaving only one as they darted around the Kumo ninja, not wanting to get too close. That pansy. He's afraid to use taijutsu, so he's just running in circles. Even Hinata-chan could take this guy. Naruto found Sato's strategy atrocious, and as an afterthought, well, there was that one time I punched him and he was completely out. It's like he's flimsier than Haku-kun. The final fire clone dove at Toshi, who avoided it as its glowing form reached out for an object forgotten on the floor beside him. Sato smirked and leapt back up onto his cable net, watching as the clone made contact with the kunai he had thrown earlier and the tag that was attached to it. Shikamaru knowingly covered his ears with a sigh. Sato knew it was a bit too much gunpowder for such a small tag, but he loved his traditional, cannon-like, weapons, as he had once explained to his teammates. The clone had detonated it, and Toshi had disappeared inside the billowing cloud of smoke. Kakashi blinked in amusement, having predicted his nephew to have tried something of the like. The leftover crater revealed a charred subsuit and Sato scratched his head, annoyed, or, rats. That's more like it. Naruto yowled down at the Leaf Ninja, pleased with the explosion even if it had left himself and Gaara half-deaf. Okay, time to try something else. Sato frantically drew out a summoning scroll and procured a chain sickle, still bent on trapping his opponent. Toshi was forming seals by the time he had thrown his weapon, and the chain successfully tangled around the Cloud Nin's arms. The side's blade bit into the skin of his shoulder. Toshi gave him an amused look, having finished his jutsu. Sato yelped after a powerful shock of electricity ran through the metal chain, setting his hair on end. Dizzy and burned, he pulled the chain away from Toshi before he could make more hand signs and discarded it, discomposed by his lack of progress. This is not working. My traps only go so far, and I don't know if I can keep up genjutsu to avoid him. He glanced down at the Kodaki at his side. I may actually have to start trying. You should give up now, you hack. Toshi smirked, rushing at him, since you're out of ideas. Sato deflected the O of kunai with both of his Kodaki, wheeling away with the grace of a cart-wheeling pinwheel. The Cloud Ninja refused to relent as he threw round after round of shuriken at the surprisingly acrobatic Leaf Genin, while he shimmied his way nearer to his remaining trap wires. He can wield those blades almost as well as Tenten. Lee exclaimed, unable to believe there was another Leaf Genin who could wield a weapon bigger than a kunai besides her. Neji gave her a suspicious sideways glance as her face paled. She frowned, wishing Lee was a bit less vocal with his observations. Well, he is my neighbor. Abruptly, Toshi had stopped launching kunai and used another jutsu while Sato paused to catch his breath. Raiten, Cage of Lightning. Ack. Before he could hope to dodge, Sato had been encircled in a tight prison of electricity. Toshi folded his arms and watched as Sato struck out at the strange, pulsing bars surrounding him with his Kodaki, only to get zapped more fiercely than he had before. Stubbornly he shuffled around, jabbing at it, trying to find a weakness in the cage, and shocking himself each time in the process. Leaf Ninja above watched in alarm when he finally tired and sheathed his short swords. Ow, ow. Sato tenderly rubbed his burned forearms, finally realizing that the end of the match was drawing near. That's it, if I can't get close enough to him with my Kodaki, or far away enough to use my traps, damn. He's already seen my fire clones too. Toshi mercilessly hurled the last of his shuriken at Sato, which penetrated the cage, and two of them bit into his shoulder and thigh. Above, both Shino and Naruto winced, wondering how much longer it would be before the match was called. Maybe. Sato frowned in thought as he extracted the bee weapons from his skin. Maybe Tama's dad is right about me. Maybe I'm a loser like he says. His frown deepened. No. What would Tama say about that? Or Shino or Sunshine? I've got to do this. In obvious pain, Sato glanced up at his mentor, smiling faintly. Kurenai sighed, knowing that she had to allow him to be free to do his best. He's been pushed to his limits, Kakashi noted, watching expectantly. Now he'll fight back. Toshi watched in annoyance as Sato formed hand seals hurriedly inside his prison. I suggest you give up now before you fry yourself. You can't get out of there no matter what you do. A mix of aggravation and relief washed over Kurenai's face as chirping filled the air, and many of the observing shinobi witnessed the technique for the first time. Sato forced the crackling chidori in his right hand through the electrical bars, interrupting the flow, and completely disabled the cage. Toshi stood a ways off, dumbfounded and unable to react. On his last legs, Sato charged ahead, dragging his chidori along with him as he rapidly picked up speed, knowing it was the only thing of consequence he had left. No way. The only person I've seen use that jutsu was. Sasuke slowly glanced over to his mentor in shock, recalling their perilous mission to the grass village. He had only seen Kakashi use the chidori, and didn't see how a rookie genin like Sato could be able to perform it. Sato entered Toshi, who had been too bewildered by his jutsu's failure to counter properly, knocking him back with tremendous momentum. The Cloud Nin flailed momentarily, unsure of what had happened. Crap, I didn't have enough chakra for it. Sato gritted his teeth as he jabbed Toshi as hard as he possibly could. Even with his chidori fizzling out, I wore myself down way too fast. I have to think of something quick. The wound on the Kumo shinobi's shoulder wasn't very deep, and Sato seemed to peel away from him dreamily, the light in his palm puttering out. Toshi planted his feet, balancing himself, ready to finish the match. What would Tama do? Sato pondered, backflipping away as gracefully as he had earlier. Oh yeah. Swiveling on his blackened hands before he could land on his feet again, Sato struck Toshi unexpectedly with a reverse kick that bashed his nose further up into his face, and sent him careening to the floor with a pained and astounded cry. Like a pinwheel he had righted himself with ease, and Sato stood grinning, observing his handiwork. I think she'd approve. Why do you have to show off, you twinkle toes? Naruto hollered, unable to believe that the physically challenged genin would actually be able to knock out his opponent. Sato hobbled about, pulling his wires down, stepping over the unconscious Cloud Ninja during his work. Hayate cleared his tea. The winner is Hatake Sato. Kakashi chuckled, ignoring Sasuke's infuriated expression. Excited and exhausted, Sato rejoined his team back up on the balcony, glad that he had earned a victory for his team. Sensei, Kurenai turned to Shino, addressing her. Forgive me for breaking my promise. What promise is this? The one in which both Hinata and I swore to prevent him from using the chidori, Shino clarified. My lack of action was attributed to you seeming uncertain if there should have been any intervention. She hadn't expected the Aberrame boy to be keen enough to notice her indecision. Yes, you were right in not acting, Shino. I will not allow him to use that technique again, but I feel it was important for him to win this match. Shino nodded, suspecting that if she had been adamant about Sato not using the chidori, she would have quickly ended the match herself. I'm back, Sato wheezed, collapsing onto the railing beside Shino, and he smiled up at Kurenai. What did you think, Sensei? She frowned. You smell singed. The final match will be between Morimoto Chiko and Uchiha Sasuke. Hayate announced, glad that the preliminary rounds were about to end. Good luck. Kakashi smiled beneath his mask as Sasuke gave him an annoyed look, not pleased that his match would be the last one. He went down to the main level, stone-faced, knowing that he had to earn a win for his team. His opponent, much like the other Cloud Ninja he had been watching, was tall and broad. Unlike his teammate, Chiko was dark-skinned with light, sharp eyes and what seemed to be a bad attitude. Sasuke's match. Naruto muttered to himself, not noticing how Gaara's expression darkened as he stood beside him to watch. So I get the Uchiha, eh? The Kumo Nin's voice was a low growl. This won't take long then. Don't fool yourself. Sasuke didn't care how badly he would beat the Cloud Shinobi, not after seeing how both Kiba and Sakura hadn't even come close to winning their own fights. You may begin when ready. Hayate stepped away to let the match commence. The Uchiha disappeared after hurling a massive kunai and shuriken, and the Kumo ninja dodged left also, refusing to lose track of his foe. With a clamor, the projectiles impacted the opposite wall, skimming past Chico as he took a familiar offensive stance. Looks like he'll be using taijutsu like the last one did, Sasuke observed, preparing to counter as the Cloud Ninja sprang, and then vanished from sight. He's fast. Lightning Palm Barrage. He was hit side-on by a number of powerful, accurate blows. The areas where Chico had struck him with an open hand had left him completely numb and slowed down his reaction time. I can't counter him if I can't feel my body moving. The Uchiha prodigy evaded another round of electrically charged S, finding his hand-eye coordination quickly dissipating. I have to use my Sharingan. As he feared, the curse mark on his end began to react as it had the last time he had activated his bloodline limit. His eyes flickered red while he stumbled in pain. Kakashi's visible eye widened, not Sasuke too. I had thought only Haku had been branded with that mark, but it appears I've been wrong. I won't let this thing control me. Sasuke managed a sweep kick to trip up and slow the charging Kumo Nin as he forced the mark back under his control, the black tomo receding further down his pale N. His red eyes narrowed as they locked onto the off-balanced Cloud Ninja, watching carefully as he prepared to attack again. As Chico launched another round of painful S, Sasuke countered with little effort, seeing his movements nearly before they happened. How is he blocking me? I can't get to any of his vital points. Chico's shock escalated when Sasuke had maneuvered around his defense with surprising speed and mimicked the painful, static jabs to the Cloud Nin's vulnerable points. Alright, Naruto and Sato were the only two ninja lively enough to be cheering on their fellow Leaf Genin. Gaara's sour mood only seemed to worsen at the sight of Sasuke doing well in his match. A swift L knocked the stunned Kumo ninja into the air, where Sasuke leapt above him and finished with a powerful, electrical kick in the gut. There was a sharp crack when Chico hit the floor, in pain, and he was unable to move after being paralyzed by his own jutsu. Dizzy, the Uchiha prodigy regained his footing, pleased he had learned a new technique during his match. Hayate looked down to Chico, knowing he wasn't about to get up anytime soon. The winner is Uchiha Sasuke. The cheers that followed were see-off as he continued. This concludes the preliminary round. All remaining genin may come down to the main floor now. Perplexed, Naruto looked to Gaara, not expecting it to be over so abruptly. What about Haku-kun? You don't think he'll be back soon? I doubt it, Gaara answered dryly, following the blonde nin down like those remaining. Troubled, Naruto said nothing more on the matter and looked at the final group of passing genin that were assembled on the floor. Sato, Shikamaru and Sasuke had made it, unlike the rest of their teammates, where in contrast the entirety of both Team 13 and Team 2 had all passed. One Sound Nin and two of the Sand Shinobi also remained, something else Naruto hadn't expected to happen. I really thought it was mostly gonna be Leaf Ninja. The Hokage also descended, and behind him Hayate had set up a chart labeled with lines and numbers. Sarutobi spoke slowly, observing the last of the genin. Well done, all of you. You will all proceed to the final stage of the Chunin selection exam, which is to say, quite different from all the other stages. The genin were silent, listening intently. The finalists participating in the third portion of the exam will be taking part in a tournament. The general public and nobles of many countries are eager to watch this campaign, the Sandaime explained. Unlike the other stages, these fights will not be randomly chosen, and you will by now have a fair knowledge of the opponent you will be facing. A tournament. Shikamaru didn't like the sound of it. So only one of us here can get the chance to become a Chunin, is what you're saying? No. Actually, you all have an equal opportunity to be selected to become Chunin during this portion of the exam, whether you win or lose your final match. Sarutobi smirked at their surprised faces. So there's a chance that we all become Chunin. Temari pointed out, hopeful. And there is just as much of a chance that none of you will become Chunin, the Hokage reminded. However, before the last part of the exam may begin, you must first draw a number from this box to determine which opponent you will be facing. That was when they noticed Hayate going down the row holding a box from which each ninja drew a piece of paper. It went quickly, and when each had gotten their own number, they read it aloud. as to be written in the proper place on the chart. Naruto stole a glance at the chart, eager to see his own match. Whoa, right off the bat I'm in the first fight. His eyes narrowed dangerously when he noted that he had been pitted against Neji. His luck could not have been any better. I'm gonna teach him not to mess with Hinata-chan. Shikamaru sighed, upset he had been placed in the second match, and I'm against another girl too. He frowned as he looked over to Tenten who stood beside Lee, also observing the chart. Gaara observed all of the matches. The fourth, much to his delight, would be between Lee and Sasuke, something he didn't want to miss. The fifth, between his brother and the last sound ninja. So that leaves my match against. It felt like he had been clubbed over the head with a very heavy rock when he noticed that he would be facing Sato, one of the last people he had expected to fight. In all honesty, he couldn't say how he'd imagined that fight to work. And that leaves Haku, who isn't present, to be in the third match against Temari. Hayate finished examining the chart, not noticing the horrified look on Gaara's face. Is there anything you would like to add, Hokage-sama? The Sandaime nodded. You all have 1 month to train and prepare before the beginning of the final stage. I strongly suggest you all use your time wisely. The tension in the air seemed to melt away after the Hokage had dismissed them, and Naruto turned to his red-haired friend, psyched, yes. I'm up against Neji. I'm gonna school him once my match comes, just you see. Gaara nodded absently to him in response, giving a concerned glance to his older sister, wondering what ill fate had placed her against one of his best friends. Kakashi nudged Sasuke in the back while reading his naughty book. Congratulations on winning your match, Sasuke. Now I feel it would be a good time to inspect that mark on your end before we go check up on your teammates. The Uchiha nodded and followed after him, not so much thrilled with his future match as Lee was, who hooted and hollered across the room at his exhausted teammates. As they exited the tower, Naruto looked to Gaara, aware of his troubled expression. Hey, are you alright, Gaara? You should cheer up. We did awesome just like I said we would. It's about Haku-kun's match. The blonde boy blinked at him. Against that girl. Don't worry. He'll totally kick her butt, you'll see. The red-haired boy sighed, torn. Go find Jiraiya-sensei and Haku-kun. I'll catch up with you later. Naruto frowned, knowing something was off. Why? What's up? There's someone I have to talk to. Gaara answered simply and said nothing else before walking away. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.